The Tomb Raider franchise is one of the most popular in gaming history, and the original being one of the best-selling PlayStation games with over 7 million copies. Originally created and developed by Core Design, they released 9 games before it was switched over to new developer Crystal Dynamics, who then released a further 8 games, including the Lara Croft side series. One of the initial 9 games was actually published and developed by Ubisoft, and that would be the first of many other spin-off series that came out from other publishers on many different platforms. The franchise then even expanded to include comic books, novels, and 3 feature-length movies, but that's not going to be the focus on today. Today we're going to be talking about what some consider to be the greatest games in the series, at least of the initial run, parts 1, 2, and 3, which recently have been remastered and re-released from developer and publisher Aspyr. Before we move on, though, I don't want to turn to tomb raiding myself, so I would greatly appreciate if you take the time to go over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames. Over there, you'll be able to find out different ways that you can help support us here at this channel, as well as the main channel at I Dream of Indie Games. There's multiple tiers that can fit your budget and give you all kinds of different perks and benefits. You might be able to get access to our Discord channel, as well as early access to some videos, maybe even some free games. So again, go over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames, and thank you for your time. The Tomb Raider series follows Lara Croft, a British archaeologist that travels the world searching for priceless artifacts. These searches in turn lead her to raiding some tombs and maybe even some ruins. Yes, there is some variety, and the title doesn't give it all away. They are 3D action-adventure games with a mix of exploration, puzzle-solving, platforming, and action gunplay. When the first Tomb Raider came out, it was a 3D Prince of Persia of sorts before any of those actually existed, and that's what initially drew me to the game. It was extremely innovative and technically impressive, plus having a female protagonist wasn't all that common back then. This newly released remastered collection is those first 3 games in the series, as well as the expansions that were previously only available, officially anyway, on the PC versions. The graphics have been improved to be a bit of an upgrade, but it's not a full-on remake. They can also be switched on the fly with a press of a button if you prefer the original look. When playing with the enhanced graphics, they are in HD and have a 60 frames per second frame rate, and when you switch to the original, it does give it that nice choppy feel as well, if that's what you're looking for. There's also a new photo mode, the addition of achievements, and some other quality of life improvements, including a camera lock. One of the major changes with this collection, though, is that you now have the choice of being able to change from the usual tank controls and switching to a more modern joystick control scheme. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the original Tomb Raider and how it played, it had some of those infamous tank controls that were rather common with early 3D gaming, with up and down moving you forward and backward respectively, and left and right rotating your character instead of moving them. It was kind of an awkward way to play games, but it was super common back then. Luckily now you do have that modern option, but I can't believe I'm saying this, I found myself actually still preferring the tank controls. I feel like this is because the game was designed with those tank controls in mind, so when you're using a more modern setup, you're kind of fighting against those design decisions. While I didn't personally prefer the modern controls, I can see this being a great entryway for those of you who maybe are younger gamers or just don't like using tank controls at all. It's not that they're bad, they just weren't for me, and thankfully they can be switched in the middle of gameplay through a pause menu. No matter which control scheme you use, and even if you switch between the two, you're always going to have a third-person view that's directly behind Lara Croft. There are buttons for jump, walk, take out and put away your guns, combat roll, basic actions, and to look around, and this can all be customized no matter which way you choose. The game can be controlled through either the D-pad or the analog stick, though it doesn't make any difference as it's still designed for you to have the run always on. That's why there is a separate button that you hold for whenever you want to walk and be a bit more careful. A great deal of the gameplay is exploring through the levels and just finding where the different items are to help you get to the next part. You might be flipping switches, finding keys, and solving puzzles that involve you moving boxes, or how to get to the next level through platforming. Being a retro game series, there is no in-game map, and so you're going to have to figure out where to go all on your own. This leads to a lot of wandering and some downtime in the action, but that's all part of the charm as well. You might have to do some backtracking because you missed something early on, or maybe the level is even designed for you to have to backtrack because you now opened up a new area. Further frustration may stem from the fact that jumps need to be extremely precise. You have to figure out whether it's a standard jump, a running jump, or maybe even you having to press the action button to catch onto a ledge. You will miss lots of jumps and have to do them over and over again. It's all part of getting better to be able to figure out how to move on next. The initial Tomb Raider releases on consoles allowed you to only save at certain points using save crystals, but thankfully this remastered version is taking after the PC versions, which allowed you to save at any point in time. This is important to keep in mind because there is no checkpoint system or any kind of auto-saving, so if you don't have a save to pick from, when you die you have to restart the entire level all over again. Graphically speaking, each game in the series improved upon the previous one, although a bit incrementally since it was still on the same hardware. This fact does get lost a little bit when you're playing the new upgraded graphics mode, as the character model is the same in all three games. A perfect example of this is when you're playing Tomb Raider 2 in the initial version. That was the first game that included her long braided hair. The original game didn't have that. But now, no matter which version of the game you're playing, including the original, she's going to have that braid. The models have been improved, but it's not going to be anything that's going to push anybody's hardware. It looks like you would be playing an early Xbox 360 game, but with the added benefit of a higher frame rate. The textures have been improved and cleaned up as well, but not too much. So it's not going to look like a full-on remake. It's definitely kind of in that middle ground where it looks like you're playing through an emulator that has some nice little texture packs. The sound effects and music have all been retained perfectly from the original releases, and the music especially is a standout. Originally released as Red Book audio, this means that it was directly playing from the CD, and you could even take the game disc and put it in your CD player and listen on its own. This British classical music sound is still there in all its glory, and it changes based on what is happening in the game. There's also even a nice little ditty to let you know when you found a secret area. As somebody who owned the original on Sega Saturn, it was great to go back and revisit that title. It brought me back to being 15 years old, hanging out in the basement while playing. And yes, there's still no nude code. You can get over that fact now. After the initial release of Tomb Raider, Core Design ended up signing an exclusive deal with Sony, so the games became exclusive to the PlayStation outside of PC. This meant that I actually never ended up playing 2 or 3 at the time of release, so being able to see them now was quite the sight. It was really cool to see how the series evolved and was able to focus when it only had one bit of hardware to really be able to deal with. This meant that the graphics improved, areas became more open, and other gameplay mechanics were added. This is exactly what sequels should be, always improving upon the previous game, and that was even more surprising when you consider the fact that they were only released a year apart from each other. Although these 3 games have been re-released many times before and have been widely available on GOG.com in a bundle for only $10, the new additions to the remastered version make it well worth the money for those that are a fan of the series. This is a great way to revisit it and have it be a bit more how you remember it as opposed to how it actually was, and maybe for those who have only played the newer games in the series will be a great way for them to experience what started it all. On top of that, if you're not playing on PC, this will be a bundle that's also going to be available on Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox. Who here is going to be picking up these remastered games? Is it something that you played as a kid and you want to revisit, or is it something that's all new to you? Feel free to let us know in the comments below, as well as like, share, and subscribe, as well as checking us out over at patreon.com/idreamofindiegames. Thanks again as always for watching, and see you next time.